The difference between a boss and a leader. The awakening. Most people have had a boss, but very few have experienced a leader. A boss tells you what to do. A leader shows you who you can become. And the difference between the two is the difference between people who quit quietly and people who give everything they have. This video is not about titles, not about authority, not about ego. This is about something far deeper. Because the truth is, you can be a boss at work and still be poor in influence. And you can be a leader long before anyone gives you permission. The silent problem. Nobody talks about. Most companies don't fail because of bad ideas. They fail because of bad leadership. Not because people are lazy, not because the market is hard, but because someone at the top confused control for leadership. And slowly, motivation dies. Creativity shuts down. Talented people leave, not loudly, quietly. The first real difference. Here is the first and most important difference between a boss and a leader. A boss needs authority to be respected. A leader earns respect without demanding it. A boss says, "Because I said so." A leader says, "Let me show you why this matters." One uses fear, the other uses belief. And belief is far more powerful than fear. Imagine two workplaces. In the first one, people watch the clock. They do only what's required. They avoid mistakes, not because they care, but because they're afraid. That place has a boss. In the second workplace, people stay late, not because they're forced, but because they feel ownership. They speak up, they solve problems, they protect the mission. That place has a leader. Same company, same industry, completely different energy. Why this matters for entrepreneurs. If you are an entrepreneur or planning to be one, listen carefully. Your first instinct will be to become a boss. Why? Because control feels safe. But control kills growth. Leadership creates it. Most founders don't lose their business because of competition. They lose it because they never evolved from boss mindset to leader mindset. The hard truth. Here's something uncomfortable but real. People don't quit jobs. They quit bosses. They quit being ignored. They quit being talked down to. They quit feeling replaceable. And when the best people leave, the business slowly bleeds to death. Self-awareness. Leadership always starts here. Before you try to lead others, you must ask, do I listen or do I just wait to speak? Do I correct mistakes or do I teach lessons? Do people feel safe telling me the truth? A boss avoids these questions. A leader confronts them. Because leadership is not about being right. It's about being responsible. Setting the foundation. A boss builds walls. A leader builds standards. A boss says, "Don't mess up." A leader says, "Here's how we win." One creates fear. The other creates clarity. And clarity creates confidence. You don't become a leader the day you get power. You become a leader the moment you stop using power to feel important. This is only the beginning. Because next, we're going to break down how bosses use authority and leaders use influence. And that difference will change how people respond to you forever. Authority versus influence. Authority can make people obey, but only influence can make people believe. This is where most bosses fail, and where real leaders are born. The illusion of authority. A boss relies on position. Their power comes from a title, from hierarchy, from fear of consequences. They say things like, "I'm the boss. This is my company. Do what you're told." And yes, people comply. But compliance is not commitment. People do the minimum. They protect themselves. They stop caring. Because authority may control behavior, but it never controls hearts. Influence, the invisible force. A leader doesn't need to remind people who they are. Their influence is felt, not announced. People listen because they trust. They follow because they respect. They work harder because they believe. A leader's power comes from consistency, integrity, competence, care, not fear. Influence makes people say, "I want to do this," not "I have to do this." Imagine two managers facing the same problem. Deadlines are missed, performance is dropping. The boss reacts with authority. They raise their voice. They threaten consequences. They remind everyone who's in charge. Results? Short-term compliance, long-term resentment. Now imagine a leader. They call a meeting, they ask questions, they listen first. They say, "Something isn't working, let's fix it together." Suddenly the room changes. People speak, ideas flow, ownership appears. Same problem, completely different outcome. Trust over fear. Fear creates silence. Trust creates honesty. A boss fears being questioned. A leader invites it. A boss says, "Don't bring me problems." A leader says, "Bring me problems early." Because leaders understand something critical. Problems don't destroy companies. Silence does. Why entrepreneurs struggle here. New entrepreneurs often become bosses by accident. Why? Because pressure is high, money is tight, mistakes feel expensive, so they control more, micromanage more, trust less. But here's the paradox. The more control you try to hold, the weaker your leadership becomes. True leadership requires courage, the courage to trust others before they prove you right. The standard leaders don't lower standards to be liked. They raise people to meet them. A boss enforces rules. A leader explains standards. A boss says, "That's unacceptable." A leader says, "Here's what excellence looks like." One humiliates, the other educates, and education creates growth. Self-check, powerful pause. Ask yourself, honestly, do people speak freely around me? Or do they wait for me to leave the room? Do people bring ideas? Or only excuses? Do people feel safe making mistakes? Or do they hide them? Your answers reveal whether you lead by authority or by influence. Authority can build a structure, but only influence can build a culture. And culture decides whether people survive or thrive. In the next part, we'll talk about something even deeper. How bosses manage people, but leaders develop people. And once you understand that difference, you'll never look at leadership the same way again. Managing people versus developing people. A boss manages people. A leader develops them. This single difference decides whether your team feels like a machine or a mission. The management trap. Bosses are obsessed with output, deadlines, metrics, numbers, results. They ask questions like, "Did you finish the task? Why is this late? Who's responsible?" And on the surface, this looks productive. But something dangerous happens underneath. People stop thinking long-term. They stop growing. They stop taking initiative. Because they're trained to execute, not evolve. A boss sees people as tools. A leader sees people as potential. A quiet but damaging scene. Picture this. An employee makes a mistake, not out of laziness, but in the process of trying something new. A boss reacts fast. "This is wrong. Fix it." "Don't fast. This is wrong. Fix it. Don't let it happen again." The lesson learned? Don't try. Now imagine the leader. They say, "Walk me through what you were thinking." They listen. Then, "Here's where it broke, and here's how we improve it next time." The lesson learned? Grow. Same mistake, completely different future. See beyond the role. A boss sees a job description. A leader sees a trajectory. Bosses ask, "What are you hired to do?" Leaders ask, "What are you capable of becoming?" That's why leaders create successors, while bosses create dependents. One builds a legacy, the other builds a bottleneck. Why this matters in business. If you want scale, you cannot be the smartest person in every room. Bosses hoard importance. Leaders distribute intelligence. Bosses fear being replaced. Leaders prepare others to replace them. Because leaders understand this truth. Your business can only grow as fast as your people grow. The cost of not developing people. When people aren't developed, they plateau, they disengage, they leave. And when your best people leave, your business doesn't collapse immediately. It bleeds slowly. Bosses blame loyalty. Leaders take responsibility. Practical leadership. Shift. Here's how leaders develop instead of manage. They explain why, not just what they coach, instead of criticize. They correct in private, praise in public. They invest time before expecting excellence. This takes more effort up front, but it saves years of damage later. A powerful question. Leaders ask instead of, "Why did you mess this up?" Leaders ask, "What did this teach us?" That question alone turns mistakes into momentum. Bosses squeeze results from people. Leaders grow results through people. One burns teams out, the other builds teams that outlast them. And next, we'll talk about a difference that separates weak leadership from unforgettable leadership. How bosses chase control. But leaders build ownership. And once people feel ownership, everything changes. Control versus ownership. Bosses crave control. Leaders create ownership. And this difference decides whether people just work for you or fight for what you're building. Why bosses love control. Control feels safe. When you control every detail, nothing surprises you. When you approve every decision, nothing escapes you. That's why bosses micromanage. Every email, every meeting, every move. Not because they're evil, but because they're afraid. Afraid of mistakes. Afraid of being blamed, afraid of losing relevance. But here's the truth. Control does not create excellence. It creates dependency. The micromanagement effect. When people are controlled, they stop thinking. They stop owning. Stop thinking. They stop owning outcomes. They wait for instructions. Why take initiative when you'll be corrected anyway? Why care deeply when you're not trusted? A boss becomes the bottleneck, and the business can't move faster than the boss's bandwidth. The power of ownership. Leaders do the opposite. They give people responsibility and authority. They say, "This is yours. Own it." And ownership changes behavior instantly. People protect what they own. They improve what they own. They think long-term about what they own. Ownership turns employees into partners, even if they don't own equity. Imagine two team members. Both have the same role. One is told, "Just follow instructions." The other is told, "You're responsible for the outcome." Who do you think grows faster? Who do you think solves problems without being asked? Who do you think stays longer? Ownership doesn't come from contracts. It comes from trust. Why entrepreneurs struggle here. Founders often say, "Nobody cares like I do." And they're right. But they forget something critical. Nobody can care like you do until you let them. Ownership is built through clear expectations, autonomy, accountability, not through hovering. The leader's framework for ownership. Leaders ask, "What does success look like? What decisions can you make without me?" How will we measure progress? Bosses ask. Why did you do it this way? One builds confidence, the other builds fear. Ownership creates leaders. When you give ownership, you don't lose control. You multiply it. Because now, problems are solved without you. Decisions are made faster. People grow into leaders themselves. This is how companies scale, not through pressure, through empowerment. Bosses hold the steering wheel tight. Leaders teach others how to drive. One exhausts themselves. The other builds a team that can go farther than they ever could alone. Next, we're going to talk about one of the most misunderstood differences of all. How bosses lead through fear, but leaders lead through example. And this part changes how people see you forever. Fear versus example. A boss leads with fear. A leader leads with example. And whether people admit it or not, this is the difference they feel the most. Why fear seems to work at first. Fear is fast. It creates instant obedience. Immediate silence, short-term results. That's why bosses use it. They threaten consequences. They shame mistakes. They raise their voice or their eyebrows. People listen, but they don't commit because fear does one thing very well. It shuts people down. What fear really creates when fear leads? People hide mistakes. They lie to protect themselves. They stop taking risks. Innovation dies first. Honesty dies next. Trust dies last. And by the time a boss notices, the damage is already done. Fear doesn't build strong teams. It builds survival mode. Lead by example. Leaders understand something bosses don't. People don't follow instructions. They follow behavior. A leader doesn't demand discipline. They live it. They don't demand accountability. They model it. They don't demand respect. They earn it. When a leader shows up early, the team notices. When a leader admits mistakes, the team feels safe. When a leader works hard without complaining, the team mirrors it. Imagine a crisis. Deadlines missed. Pressure rising. Stress everywhere. A boss explodes. This is unacceptable. A leader steps forward and says, "This is on me. Let's fix it together." That sentence alone changes everything. Suddenly, blame disappears. Focus returns. Unity forms. Example creates calm. And calm creates clarity. Why example is hard. Leading by example costs something. It costs ego. It costs comfort. It costs excuses. You can't ask people to be disciplined if you're inconsistent. Be honest if you hide. Be calm if you panic. Leadership exposes you. That's why many avoid it. The mirror effect. Your team is a mirror. If you rush, they rush. If you complain, they complain. If you cut corners, they cut corners. But if you stay calm under pressure, if you take responsibility, if you hold yourself to a higher standard, they rise, not because you told them to, but because you showed them how. A leader's daily question. Leaders ask themselves, if everyone acted like me today, would this team be stronger or weaker? Bosses never ask that, because bosses believe leadership is about control. Leaders know it's about example. Fear can make people move, but only example can make people believe. And belief is what creates loyalty, the kind that stays even when things get hard. Next, we're going to talk about something subtle, but incredibly powerful. How bosses chase short-term results, while leaders build long-term legacy. This is where leadership becomes timeless. Short-term results versus long-term legacy. A boss thinks in quarters. A leader thinks in decades. And this difference determines whether people burn out or grow into something meaningful. The obsession with short-term results. Bosses live under constant pressure. Targets, deadlines, numbers. Everything is urgent. Everything is now. They push harder. They demand more. They squeeze productivity from people until there's nothing left. And yes, results appear. But at a cost. Energy drops. Morale fades. Turnover rises. Short-term wins often hide long-term damage. The burnout cycle. Here's what usually happens under boss-driven leadership. People give extra effort. They sacrifice balance. They ignore warning signs. Until one day, they're exhausted, not tired, empty. Bosses call this lack of commitment. Leaders recognize it as bad leadership. Think beyond today. Leaders zoom out. They ask, what kind of team are we becoming? Will this system still work next year? Are we growing people or just using them? Leaders understand something critical. If you destroy people to hit goals, you eventually destroy the goals too. Building a legacy mindset. A leader builds systems that last, cultures that sustain, values that outlive them. They invest in training. They protect energy. They allow recovery. Not because they're soft, but because they're strategic. Sustainable teams outperform burned-out teams every single time. A hard truth for entrepreneurs. If your business collapses when you step away, you don't own a business. You own a job. Bosses build dependence on themselves. Leaders build structures that survive without them. Legacy is not about being needed. It's about being replaceable. What legacy-focused leaders do differently. They document processes. They mentor future leaders. They reward long-term thinking. They make decisions aligned with values. They don't chase applause. They build foundations. The legacy question. Leaders ask, if I leave tomorrow, what remains? Bosses ask, how do I get through this week? One builds endurance, the other builds exhaustion. Results matter, but legacy matters more, because results fade, titles disappear. But the impact you leave on people lasts longer than any metric. And next, we're going to talk about the final and most revealing difference of all. How bosses seek loyalty, but leaders earn trust. This is where leadership becomes unshakable. Loyalty versus trust. A boss demands loyalty. A leader earns trust. And this difference determines whether people stay because they must, or because they choose to. The myth of loyalty. Bosses love the word loyalty. They say things like, after everything I've done for you, you should be loyal to this company. We're like family here. But loyalty built on guilt, fear, or obligation is fragile. It only lasts until a better option appears. Because forced loyalty is not loyalty at all. It's dependence. What forced loyalty looks like when loyalty is demanded. People nod, but don't commit. They stay physically, but leave emotionally. They do just enough to survive. The moment pressure lifts, they leave. Bosses feel betrayed. Leaders understand the truth. You cannot command loyalty. You can only deserve it. Trust is the foundation. Trust is built slowly, through consistency, through honesty, through fairness. Leaders don't manipulate emotions. They create safety. They keep their word. They admit mistakes. They protect their people, even when it costs them. And when trust exists, something powerful happens. People stay, even when they could leave. A real moment of trust. Imagine this. A company is struggling. Budgets are tight. The future is uncertain. A boss hides the truth. A leader tells it. They say, this will be hard. I won't promise comfort, but I will promise honesty. That transparency builds trust, and trust builds loyalty, the kind that survives storms. Why trust is risky. Trust requires vulnerability. It means letting people see uncertainty, letting go of absolute control, accepting that not everyone will stay. Bosses avoid trust because they fear losing power. Leaders embrace trust because they understand power without trust is meaningless. How leaders build trust. Daily leaders. Speak truth even when uncomfortable. Apply rules consistently. Give credit publicly. Take blame privately. Protect dignity at all times. These moments seem small, but stacked together, they create unbreakable trust. The trust test. Ask yourself, do people tell me the truth or what I want to hear? Do they defend me when I'm not in the room? Do they feel safe disagreeing with me? These answers reveal whether you've built loyalty or trust. Loyalty fades under pressure. Trust deepens. And leaders who earn trust never have to ask people to stay. They stay because they believe. Next, the final part. We'll bring everything together and define what true leadership really is, not as a title, not as a role, but as a responsibility. The responsibility of true leadership. Leadership is not a title. It's not a corner office. It's not the power to tell people what to do. True leadership is a responsibility. It is the responsibility to see potential in people, to protect them while pushing them to grow, to own outcomes without hiding behind excuses. A leader asks, how can I make this better? How can I lift the team higher? A boss asks, why didn't you do what I told you? One creates futures, the other creates fear. The legacy of a leader: leaders leave more than results. They leave confidence, courage, inspiration, a culture that lasts long after they're gone. Bosses leave rules, deadlines, resentment, and when they're gone, no one remembers them except for their mistakes. Legacy is not about being needed, it's about being deserved. Imagine a team on the brink. Pressure is mounting, mistakes happen, dreams feel fragile. A boss shouts, micromanages, blames. The team collapses. The leader steps forward, calm, present, responsible. They say, "We can handle this together, step by step." The energy shifts, people rise, solutions appear, ownership spreads. That's the difference. That's leadership. Step-by-step takeaways. If you want to move from being a boss to a true leader, remember these steps. 1. Self-awareness. Know your impact on people. 2. Influence over authority. Lead through trust, not fear. 3. Develop people. Don't just manage tasks, grow talent. 4. Create ownership. Give responsibility and autonomy. 5. Lead by example. Model the behavior you expect. 6. Think long-term. Build legacy, not just immediate results. 7. Earn trust, not demand loyalty. Trust multiplies influence. Follow these principles. And you won't just have a team, you'll have a movement. One day, someone will call you a boss. That is temporary. One day, someone will call you a leader. That is eternal. You don't become a leader by waiting for permission. You become a leader by taking responsibility, by serving, by caring, by being brave enough to grow yourself before you try to grow others. Leadership is a choice, every day, every action, and if you choose it wisely, you won't just lead a team, you'll lead a life worth following. If this video inspired you, do this one thing: like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to see the truth about leadership. Because leadership isn't taught in books, it's shown through action, and your journey starts today.